My main question was going to be, why do we suffer? I mean, some people look at one group of people or one type of person and think they have the perfect life or they have the perfect family. But having personally been on so many sides of the fence, it's like the grass is always greener. You're looking at something thinking that's the perfect thing, and then when you get there, it's not. You're still suffering no matter what. Like if you're rich, you're suffering the taxes. If you're poor, you're suffering from starvation, or there's, on both sides of the fence, there's always suffering. So my question is, why do we suffer?
Wasn't expecting to get to this place so quickly. It's a very profound question, and one that's always completely amazed me. One of our spiritual teachers in our lineage, his name was Sanatan Goswami, and this was back in the 1500s, about the time of the Renaissance. He had come from an extremely wealthy family, born into great privilege. He had become a high-ranking member, like the equivalent of like a prime minister under a Muslim emperor in Bengal, and then later gave everything up to seek an understanding of what it's all about. And he encountered and met up with his spiritual master, who was known as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a great spiritual personality. And one of the first questions he asked him in this encounter is, why am I suffering? Why do we suffer? And their understanding of suffering was like far more far out than ours. They have three words: adi atmic, adi bodhic, adi devic. Adi atmic means suffering due to my own body and mind. It's sort of one category of suffering, and can be exist on a whole different levels of magnitude. Adi bodhic is the suffering that comes from others, whether it's an insect biting me, something that's invaded, a pathogen that's invaded my body, and now I've got typhoid or malaria or some really crappy disease, or whether it's my neighbor or the bloke next to me that won't share a joint, or the one who stole my stash. There's all the myriad of sufferings that come from others. And the third, they call it adi devic. It means natural forces like excessive heat, excessive cold, rain, earthquakes, all these kind of things that are beyond our control. So they understood that there was a wide variety of suffering. And something that we really need to get a grip on really fast. There is no perfect life in this world. So lighten the fuck up. I really, because there's no perfect life here. My wife's brother, he came from a very wealthy family in the Philippines. He was a really handsome guy, good looking. He was really buff, into diving, and he had his own businesses. He was super popular, had a fantastic personality, and he ended up shooting himself. And his big problem was he falsely thought that everybody else is happy, and that other relationships and people with families and that's all kind of like somehow they're experiencing something that's perfect. And whereas my life is shit, I'm totally empty, I'm totally alone. This is a spiritual condition, not a material condition. It's not bad to feel this way. It's not bad. It's actually a good thing, because then it becomes an inspiration to ask, so what is it all about? What should I be doing? Is it possible to get beyond the different types of suffering in this world? And of course the answer is yes. That when we grow in a deeper understanding of our spiritual identity, and we're living that reality as a spiritual being inhabiting this body. And this body is going to go through crap. You think life's a bummer now. You just go through the aging process. Go hang out in an old age home where people are bedridden and it's like you've gone from a baby who couldn't feed itself and can't control its bowels and it's shitting and urinating all over itself and being totally dependent on its parents and those around it. And then you go through this whole cycle of growth and maintenance and then decline, and you end up back in the same place again. That's the natural cycle. Don't try to fight it. That's crazy land, trying to fight it, trying to pretend it's not going to be like that. We have this desire for happiness and a desire for things not to end because we are spiritual beings. It's part of our spiritual nature. But when we've lost the plot and forgotten all about that and just totally become immersed in the body as being who I am and seeking to find fulfillment only through that vehicle, you're going to end up with a proverbial shit sandwich. Sorry.
So when you say that we're not the body, what then are we and why are we here?
The first part of the question is a lot easier than the second. Not easier to talk about, but easier for people to understand. The body is not a person. All you got to do is be with someone that has died. And the instant somebody leaves the body and all that's left is an empty shell, this body, it instantly feels unclean and unattractive. Even somebody that you loved very much. I mean, you just don't really want to be around it. Not really. You're overwhelmed with shock and fear and confusion, and in feeling that, wow, I need to show respect, to the memory of my friend or my parent or something. Those things are all there, but inherently you feel that the body has become something that's incredibly unattractive. It repulses you. The thing that attracts you to a live body is the fact that there is an eternal, an amazing spiritual being within. That is the source of life. That is the source of personality. That's who we are. But we have lost touch with that reality. And we are trying to live out a vain hope that we can find some perfection in this temporary material world, in this temporary body that we're in, that we can find something of enormous value. I'm not saying one should turn their back on the world and reject things. I'm saying we have to be realistic. Half of the suffering that people go through is because of having unrealistic expectations, thinking that this world is my home, that there is a perfection to be experienced here, there is a completeness of love and all these things, that are contained within this world and with material personalities, and it's not true. It's absolutely not true. And so the spiritual path is to seek the reality of who I am and to reconnect and live that and to begin to be more focused on a spiritual journey with spiritual experience. You asked earlier about suffering, and I'll tie it into this one. In the Vedas, they teach about reincarnation, which is more accurately should be transmigration of the soul. Transmigration of the soul means that at the time of death, a person generally is going to end up taking another body, another birth. When a child shows up, people think of it as being just innocent and pure and new. And no, it's not. That little dude shows up with massive amounts of baggage from previous lives, all kinds of good and bad karmic results from things that they've done, They bring with them certain types of desires and conditioning and everything that, carries on life after life. In the third world countries, and, you're seeing it now even in America. I don't know what it's like in the UK. You can see in intersections, where you get a red light and the cars are all there and somebody's knocking on the window begging. And when you go to the third world, whether it's Africa, Asia, wherever, you've got people that are in deplorable state, raggedy ass, dirty, and they're really having such a hard time. And they could be standing at the window of a car, a Mercedes Benz, and inside there's some guy with his iPad doing his whole trip, and he's got a driver. He's off to some big corporate position that, he owns something or works somewhere. And so he's seen to be living a life of privilege. From the perspective of a saintly person, he sees those two people as being in the same boat. And that any time they're going to be able to change places just automatically as one progresses through this cycle of repeated birth and death. And so suffering, is perceived as being the attempt by the eternal spiritual being to find fulfillment in this world where it cannot be fulfilled. And so you will suffer because of that. And the other one is because one is cultivating and maintaining material desires, one will repeatedly take birth, and they will go through all the different species, they will go through all the different stations in life, and that's the ultimate in suffering. You think you got it bad now, it can get much, much worse. And when a person is even in the most deprived and deplorable state, if they have begun the process of self-realization, of spiritual activity and the meditation which awakens us to who we really are, our spiritual identity, one can be experiencing boundless joy in that and feel free from all the anxieties associated with being in difficult physical situation. So the second part of your question, I said, was actually a bit more difficult not to talk about, but for people to understand and appreciate. Your suffering will be directly connected or proportionate to how self-centered you are. This is what is known in the Vedas as being the ultimate spiritual ailment that has infected everyone. I mean, we've got how many billion people on the earth now, and every single one of those people see themselves as the center of things. I talk about my life and I see everything related only to me. I don't feel deep empathy for other people that I have no, even if I see them, I don't feel like I've got any connection with them. And I don't feel their pain, I don't feel their suffering. Whereas the great spiritualists, they're profoundly impacted by the great suffering of all humanity, not just human beings, all living beings. They have this deep empathy because the suffering is unnecessary. And it occurs because we basically want to be like God. We want to be the center of everything. It's all about me. It's all about, everything's about me. I'm just, and this means that we live a life more of taking than of giving.